There's trash under them freeways.
So there was this big fire underneath Interstate 10 in Los Angeles.
It's going to cost millions to fix the damage.
And then we find out that people were storing junk cars and pallets
And even a bunch of those fake walls that they use for TV and movies.
underneath the freeway.
But the worst is just outright trash.
Junk!
Trash.
And it wasn't just where the fire was.
Go for a drive through the city of LA and look at just how much flammable stuff you can find. There's entire buildings down there.
Does the state of California know about this? Well, what if I told you not only do they know about it, it has the blessing of California's state legislature? And I want to know, that's a mistake, right?
Most elevated freeways sit on dirt, but in some downtown areas that just doesn't work.
Back in the 50s and 60s, when California first built this freeway, it was just a giant bridge.
Sometimes there are so many city streets packed close together, it's just easier to build one long bridge. So in LA, they did. 3 miles long, all on stilts. Hundreds and hundreds of columns holding up the bridge deck.
But all that space underneath, well, it was just a field. It was something that the state of California would have to mow and chase people out of.
Which costs money, unless they rented the property out to somebody else and it became their problem. Which they did. It's called an airspace lease, and one of my favorite examples is actually outside of California, near Reno, Nevada. A casino up along Interstate 80 decided to rent out some space under the freeway for a bakery and storage facility. I booked a room there once. It was a fun view. This really is a trophy. Collaboration between the feds, Nevada, and a private property owner. West a few miles, another developer made plans for a casino on top of I-80 until the financier found out
Casinos have gambling?
so he backed out of the deal. True story. And it sat this way for years until Walgreens stepped in and opened this store in 2002.
And it can be a little bit risky putting cars and buildings and flammable trash underneath the freeway, but there are two benefits: money and money.
Look at that land sitting there empty, not making anybody any money. But if the state leases that land out, it can generate rent for decades and decades into the future. And then the state can reinvest that money back into the highway system. Once upon a time, California wanted to build a freeway across Beverly Hills. As you might imagine, it never happened, which meant this big wasted field in the middle of the Hollywood freeway.
So back around the time Back to the Future was in theaters, Caltrans leased out the airspace of that median right here to the storage facility. And instead of making $0 a month and having to maintain all this, they started to make $14,000 a month, and that was 1985 money.
Lots of cities were dreaming up ways they could make money off freeways that had cut through their city after a change when the federal government in 1961 said, okay, you could put that airspace to work. So Connecticut built a library over Whitehead Highway, Chicago a post office over the Eisenhower Expressway, and New York sold the airspace over I-95 for $1 million to the developer of these 4 apartment buildings. But California has no interest in selling airspace because that gets the state money one time. A lease is ongoing, which brings us to the second money benefit.
Once upon a time, this was all developed property that the city of Los Angeles was collecting property tax on. But then the state came through and built the 101 freeway, and you can guess how much money a freeway pays in property taxes. I'll give you a hint. It's that much. But by leasing out the airspace in the middle of the median here to that storage yard, leasing out the airspace underneath the freeway, those become taxable parcels again that the city of Los Angeles can make money off of.
We're talking about 2 benefits of airspace leases, but there's also kind of a third.
Let's say you own a factory. You want to build a new factory. Well, there's no vacant lots in LA. There haven't been in decades, so you'd have to go far outside of town to build it.
As was the case for a company that sewed garments in Los Angeles.
But with airspace leasing, there's space right there underneath the freeway.
So they signed a lease and built this very building, using the deck of the freeway bridge as the roof. They had planned to move out to the suburbs, but thanks to an airspace lease, they didn't have to.
That's economic development that stays here in the city rather than going someplace else, which means, well, more money for Los Angeles. It always comes back to money.
The typical lease is for 55 years, something the state takes quite seriously. And the state has baked that into the governing legislation. After the big fire, California sent out this spreadsheet to media showing all the airspace leases, and right now the state has 601. But businesses, warehouses, and even open junk storage are less than 1/4. The vast majority are cell phone towers and parking lots. I gotta wonder how many of these cause the state problems.
Okay, so here are the rules governing airspace leases. Number 1, they can't be more than 99 years long. 2, they have to be safe, not just for the highway, but for the land uses around it. And a fun one, number 3, authorized emergency vehicles get preference to use it at no cost. So if you know your old classic TV shows, you know the most famous airspace lease here. Bum, 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 and it's still here all these decades later.
The TV famous CHP precinct, renting for free.
But the law does say that that freebie only applies to active duty police cars and fire trucks, so CHP couldn't just have a big yard storing a bunch of cars down here.
At least not for free.
Rule number 4, the bids on this space have to be competitive, open to everybody, so no friend of City Hall getting special treatment. Number 5, when Caltrans is designing a new freeway, they can consider areas that they might want to lease out later and put that into their design as they build the freeway. And number 6, another good one, Caltrans has to make airspace available for mass transit lines and support facilities. I guess that's why there's a bus yard right over there.
Honestly, kind of a win-win. Buses in cities still need a big yard where land is valuable, and it's kind of ugly underneath the freeway.
And finally, the biggest one of all, the state cannot sign an airspace lease over to a developer if that development conflicts with local zoning code. And oh boy, does that one make a huge mess.
With all this talk about renting out space underneath the freeway, let's remember that Caltrans' 1960s dream was developing over the freeway, like the Jetsons, something that's never seemed to have panned out for them.
Part of that's due to this tiny but really steep hill next to the Harbor Freeway here in downtown LA. A developer went to Caltrans and they had this crazy idea to build a park on a bridge connecting the downtown core on the east side of the freeway to the west side that has really no connection to downtown, no good one anyway. And they told Caltrans, lease us the airspace and we'll put a couple of skyscrapers on it and it'll be fantastic. Caltrans looked at their design and said, yeah, we like it too, let's do it. But as you can see, it never actually got built.
It goes back to that airspace rule saying all private leases have to conform with local zoning.
Well, you thank the company Unical, back when that was a thing, because their headquarters used to be right there. Well, they didn't want new buildings blocking people's view of their fabulous 1960s looking high-rise there, and 22 property developers on the east side of downtown said, well, we don't want you blocking the view of our buildings over there. And with all that opposition, the wheels of City Hall started to turn like glue. About 3-4 years later, the airspace lease idea here was dead.
It might explain why half of all airspace leases that are not cell phone towers are just plain parking lots. Parking goes in any zone.
Up near Caltrans headquarters, Sacramento, the city council wasn't too excited about putting in a grocery store underneath the freeway or a hotel over the freeway. They adopted a resolution that said, nah, we'd rather those airspace leases be used for parking lots, kind of like this one. And today, that's mostly what you see.
They ended up building that grocery store a few blocks north of the freeway.
Lost opportunity, I suppose.
And when you see the state of the I-10 leases, you can't help but feel a little bit disappointed.
It's not to say that the airspace program's been a failure. It makes California a lot of money, and it's opened up a lot of economic opportunity.
And given us over 150 cell towers and 200 lots to park in.
But I just don't feel like airspace leasing has ever yet fully reached its potential of what it could be.
Especially here in Los Angeles, we're driving around, it just looks ugly.
This is a moment where at least city council members are asking the state to reconsider what kind of tenants they lease the space out to and how frequently they inspect the property to make sure people aren't storing flammable pallets and cars.
But Caltrans do say they've inspected half of the properties in the last 12 months and another 50 since the fire. With everybody giving big attention to the airspace program for the first time in decades, maybe it'll spur on some creative new development ideas. You know, it's a little bit ironic that construction crews are bringing in more flammable wood so they can fix the freeway. It's actually a really cool project, and I talk about it in the longer video I made about the fire. Link in the upper left corner if you want to watch. And of course, all made possible without any sponsor interruptions, thanks to the generous contributions of very real people like you.